あなたも私もポッキー。あなたも私もポッキー。あなたも私もポッキー。あなたも私もポッキー。あなたも私もポッキー。あなたも私もポッキー。あなたも私もポッキー。あなたもわた Oh, okay, fair enough.
白岩学園3年 B 組の皆さん、こんにちは。
Okie dokie, good evening. Let's see, let's go up to the main. There we are. And, hey everybody, all 5 of us here today. Fantastic. Excuse me. It's been a long day, and my apologies. At any rate, so then, today is a light news day compared to the last, say, week and a half for some reason. I have no idea why, but the news cycle just went freaking nuts over the past, week and a half. I mean, good heavens. There were 2 shootings that made the news. I'm sure they were completely real and not false flags at all. I would never distrust media. What else happened? There were talks of gun grabs. As always, there's always talks of fucking gun grabs. And the, some kind of a white supremacist went ahead and got himself locked up into a honeypot. Fucking retards. But then again, the FBI, they always go after retards, so whatever. But the thing, it makes good news, and it gets away from the big news, which of course is Epstein. My good heavens, Epstein. And heroing, but not even and heroing, because and hero suggests something cool. Nothing cool came of that, just super lame. Anyhow, yeah, freaking absolutely incredible things going on, and then today, just freaking nothing, absolutely nothing. Though I have been watching, or not watching, I've been listening to NPR. I can't help myself. There are two radio stations right next to each other that are both NPR. Excuse me. That are both NPR sympathetic or affiliates. And both of them are hyper progressive. One of them is KCRW, which here in Los Angeles is kind of a big deal. And the other one is KPFK, which I like to refer to as K-racism. It's all racism all the time. And yeah, both of them, they've been harping on, yeah, Pacifica, that's correct, Jonathan Pohl. Yeah, both of them have been just banging on about white nationalism and evil white supremacists and so on. And the whole weekend, it's been nothing but that. There's this retarded Australian guy named like Ian Masters or something like that. And all he does is your normal propaganda spin of whatever the news is, with a shitload of ad hominem and insinuation, with the assumption that, people will listen and take him seriously. At any rate, it's been getting absolutely out of control. And I'm thinking that since they have been increasing the rhetoric regarding the threat of terrorism from evil white supremacists and white nationalists and separatists and blah blah blah, they've been trying to push that in such a way that people buy it. Now, if you are a progressive, you probably are going to buy it. I've been listening to progressives, and many of them actually do believe this stuff. I live in Los Angeles, so take that for what you will. People are very willing to believe corporate media here. Anyhow, I honestly do expect that what we're going to see are more of these weird shootings or whatever, and they're going to be designed. I think this is crazy sounding. God, I know it's crazy sounding, and I can't help it, but I do think that these things are fake. I don't believe them. I genuinely don't believe these. The Vegas shooting. No one has any idea why the Vegas shooting happened. The evidence was destroyed. The idea that it had anything to do with a bump stock, that is to say, the idea that whoever it was that did the shooting in Vegas, the idea that they used a bump stock is retarded. Retarded. Bump stocks are not good for distance shooting, and with the Vegas shooting, he was on whoever it was multiple stories up. I mean, we're talking about well over 1,000 feet to get to the nearest bystander, and using a bump stock to do anything beyond a couple dozen feet? No, that's not how it works at all. So I just don't buy it. I do not buy it. I don't buy it. And I think that there's going to be more of these kinds of events. The El Paso shooting, the guy was half Mexican and half Iranian? But the thing is that Iranian is code for Jewish here. And if I recall, was it the Dayton shooter? The Dayton shooter, I think, was the guy whose father was like... he was tied to a pharmaceutical company that went bust for experimental trials on psychotropic drugs, whatever, Jewish guy, some bull crap. I mean, just weird things going on with all of that. And I think that we're going to see more of these kinds of things. We're going to see more of these sorts of events that are designed very specifically to attack our civil liberties. And by civil liberties, I mean my two favorite amendments of the Bill of Rights, which are Amendment Number 1 and Amendment Number 2. The concept that we are now living in basically a free-for-all, where on a legislative level, the progressives can basically just take aim at whatever they want and just say, we don't want that anymore. And the public is going for it. I mean, this is mind-blowing for me. Back in the 90s, when I was a teenager, I just assumed that I was always, I mean, my gosh, when I turned 18 or 21, it never crossed my mind to purchase a firearm because it just seemed completely irrelevant. It would be like buying a leather coat. It's like, well, okay, but what the fuck am I going to use it for? And then somewhere in my 20s, a very quick flashing thought passed my mind, which was, I can actually buy one of those. And same thing, it would have been like buying a supersized Kit Kat. It was like, okay, I know that I can buy it, but I'm not interested in the least. Now suddenly I'm like, holy shit, I took it all for granted. I took all of it for granted. All of those silly movies, the Austin Power types. Weirdly, Austin Powers on Netflix, but Netflix is trying to go woke. Austin Powers was, interestingly, proto-woke. If you look at the first Austin Powers movie especially, they were pushing feminism. And then through, I think to Austin Powers 3, they were pushing racial equity and so on. And so it's like, it's weird that Austin Powers is now, like, it's pretty fucking racy. Like, when you think about an SJW watching Austin Powers, I can't imagine an SJW thinking this is normal and this is okay. I think that an SJW would watch Austin Powers and flip out. Anyway, the point is that way back when I was a kid, I just took it for granted that there would be movies like that and that it wouldn't be a big deal. And now suddenly it's like, holy shit, man. These things are going absolutely crazy. Anyhow, the thing is that I've been thinking about the way that the news cycles have been going. I've been thinking about what has been pushed in NPR, and it's always predictive programming. Whatever you hear, the things that you hear on NPR are the things that they want to push in the future. That's just the way that it goes. So at the moment, or rather, they have always been pushing gun control. And they very frequently talk about the evils of hateful speech or something. Not as much as you would think, though, surprisingly. But I do hear it. It's almost like a part of the background chatter. Anyhow, recently they have gone apeshit on white nationalists. So essentially everyone in chat, because we are all woke, we are all race realists, we're pretty much in the thick of it. And I would implore everyone to engage in super duper optics. Do everything you can to be as genial as you can possibly be, in the sense that in public, online it's a different issue and it's a different story entirely, but when you are dealing with people IRL, I would implore you to just be aware of who you are talking to, because it's genuinely unknown at this point in time what's coming down the pike. I realized a little while ago that the white liberals are going to be the neo-kulaks. White liberals are going to be completely backstabbed by the progressives, by the woke left, and so on. and I don't know how vicious they're gonna get. I really don't know. I genuinely have no idea, but I expect that it's probably gonna get pretty rough, and I don't know who's gonna get the worst of it. The people that they call white nationalists or the woke liberals, because invariably the people that you call traitors, for some reason, they get the worst of it. They get the brunt. So we may be able to, it's possible we might be able to skirt some of the more, but then again, it's like the only reason that it hurts so much when you are being betrayed is because like you care, you believed in the person, so on and so forth. So maybe they'll be just as hard on their own as they will be on us. It's just that we on a mental and emotional level have decided that we're no longer a part of the I mean, I speak for myself in this one. I don't know how many other people, now that I think about it, I don't know how many people in chat are ex-Democrats. I am an ex-Democrat. So for me, there's a certain amount of betrayal, I suppose. So there's an extra layer there that isn't present for absolutely everyone else. But at any rate, the point is simply that depending on the breaks, it might be worse on some of the woke leftists, the white woke liberals, but I'm genuinely not sure. I really don't know. But again, as I say, all of that said, no, they're pushing it. They're pushing attacks on us hardcore. So just do what you can to be aware of what's going on. Okay, now that I've belabored that point a lot. Oh, nice. Goose was never a Democrat, but he voted for Obama. That's funny. I stopped being a Democrat sometime in like 2005, I think. And by 2008, I was going to vote for Ron Paul, but Ron Paul pulled out and requested that people vote for Nader. I'm pretty sure that I voted for Nader on that round, and then I abstained in 2012, and then for keks and memes, I decided that Trump was going to get my vote in 2016. In 2004, I think I voted for Kerry, but I'm not sure. And in the year 2000, I voted for Gore. And if I recall correctly, I was technically able to vote for Clinton in 96. I would have just turned 18 at that time, and Ross Perot was making all the rounds back in those days. Anyway, yeah, it's just funny. It's just funny. Let's see here. Have I read an e-scooter? No, I don't know what rode an e-scooter. Oh God, no, I refuse to get on those things. At no point in time will you see old Eke Lux on an e-scooter. I have all the desire in the world to take a screwdriver and a wrench and just disassemble all of them and send them to recycling centers. But I'm not advocating that anyone do that. I'm just saying that's what I would want to do. Left to my own devices. What about a hoverboard? Of course, everyone wants a hoverboard. My favorite form of transportation outside of a car is actually bicycles. I'm a huge fan of bicycles. Side note, anyone that's interested in thinking about this has nothing to do with anything at all. I'm going to get over to the book as soon as I can. But if you are thinking about things like zombie apocalypse or societal breakdown or whatever, I would highly recommend getting a single speed bicycle. And I remember thinking about this a lot, and the most common brakes, so the most common bicycle type is the beach cruiser, and the most common brake type for mountain bikes and beach cruisers, like after beach cruisers it goes mountain bikes, and the most common types of brakes for both mountain bikes and beach cruisers are V-brakes. Now, on mountain bikes, it's moved to disc brakes, as well as for a lot of high-end road bikes. but V-brakes are still used a hell of a lot on cruisers and mountain bikes. So, and when you think about wheel type, the most common wheel type is actually the 700C. 29s are used on mountain bikes, and 29s actually have the exact same circumference as a 700. So if you get 700 by like 35, it'll technically work on 29er wheels. The only problem with that is that they're like stretched all the way, so it's a bit of a thing. But you actually can do that. Like in a pinch, you can throw super fat, wide 700 tires onto 29er wheels. Point is, some of the most common wheel types are 29ers. So if one was going to get a zombie apocalypse bike, take me with a grain of salt. I'm just throwing it out there, but what I would do is I would get a single speed 700 with V-brakes, basically a cyclocross frame. Get a cyclocross frame with a frame wide enough to take like 35s, which would be pretty wide tires, and you should theoretically be able to throw 29er wheels in there. It'll just make clearance, and I mean just make clearance, but it should make clearance. And you'll have like an indestructible bike. For personal reasons, I'm probably just going to end up getting a single speed road bike, and I'll just throw like 28s or something on there, and it'll be fine. You can actually get like knobby 28s. You can get snow tire 28s with like little tiny the little pins in them that look like nails or something, and they're fine. It's not a big deal, and you can beat the shit out of them. Anyway, the point is that with the and also the great thing about getting a single speed is that you can run fixed, and if you run fixed, then you can actually increase the life of your brake pads, because you are the brakes. By backpedaling on a fixed gear bicycle, you end up doing the braking. If you happen to live in a hilly or mountainous terrain, that's not so ideal, but of course, I've lived in Los Angeles my whole life, so I'm kind of used to flats. So maybe my thought pattern will change once I get to a different location. The point is simply that with a single speed bike, you can actually have a really, really, really durable bike, and it'll be hard to break. So just throwing it, and you don't have to pay for gas. The only thing you have to worry about is like, is there air in the tires? Is the chain lubed? That's it. As long as there's air in the tires and the chain is lubed, you can go on indefinitely, and it's not a big deal. So just throwing that out there. Anyhow, no. Tom Anderson says that I rode brakeless. No, I did actually ride brakeless for like one day, and that was enough for me. The moment I was clipped in and I was able to do stuff, but like I had a really high gear ratio, so I designed my fixie for speed. So this doesn't mean anything to anyone, but it means something to me. At the time, I was running, I think, 4715 or 4615. No, I think I was running 4615. And 4615 is a hell of a gear ratio. That's the high side of medium. You're actually going places if you're riding a gear ratio like that. And I was riding with some buddies of mine, and just going through traffic, doing things, whatever. I was going kind of slow, and I got into the left turn bay, and there was traffic to my right and traffic to my left and no median. And out of nowhere, I just realized, I was riding brakeless, and there was a car stopped directly in front of me, and I forgot and then remembered. So if you can imagine, I already had the momentum, and then as I was having to stop, I realized, holy shit, I'm brakeless. And so I had to freaking push and pull, practically tugging my hip out of socket to stop. And once I did that, I was like, oh, okay, I'm always going to have a front brake, no questions asked. So if you are going to ride with if you're going to ride fixed, I would implore you, please, for the love of God, have a front brake at the very least. Front and back, if at all possible. Is this the LA hipster stream? Yeah, former fixie douchebag. I really am a former fixie douchebag. That's 100% the case. I really loved my bike tremendously. The only reason that I don't ride it right now is for physiological reasons, which is too bad because I fucking miss that bike. Anyhow, alright, so we are now at about the half hour, and I'm going to get back over to the book in just a moment, but before I do, let's see here, was it the welfare bike? No, it wasn't the welfare bike. The bike that I had, I actually sunk over $1,000 into it, and to this day I regret selling it. But yeah, it was really lightweight, and it was not a ground up build at the start. Like, I bought just a complete bike, but I kept changing out parts. And with each part that I changed out, it just, as one would expect, it just got more and more modified until the only things that were stock on it were like the seat post clamp, the frame, fork, and headset. But otherwise, everything else, obviously the stem, handlebars, saddle, seat post, the cranks, the bottom bracket, the pedals, the front wheel I bought, the back wheel I laced up myself, the front brake. I actually went through 3 front brakes until I finally settled on the one that I liked. And I went through, you have no idea how many handlebars I went through. I ended up settling on track drops, and those ended up being my favorite handlebars. But yeah, oh my God, it's stupid. The same thing that happens with guns. Like, you buy something and you're like, okay, so I've got my whatever it is, 1911 or something like that, and then out of nowhere you're like, I can get some new grips on there. I can go ahead and I can get a better trigger in there. All right, that's fine, cool, great. So, now that I think about it, you know what? I'd much prefer to get a slide release that's a little. I'm gonna go for a Wilson Combat slide release. Okay, fine. And actually, I don't need the ambi safety. I think I don't need the left hand or the right hand side for left hand shooters. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get a new safety just for right hand. That way, it's a little more aesthetic as well. Yeah, it just keeps going. It keeps going, and that's what happens anytime you've got a bike. It's awful. Next thing you know, you've spent literally $1,000 on something that it's like $400, and you're like, the fuck was I thinking? What was I doing? It's stupid. Anyway, okay, so now that I've wasted a lot of time and it doesn't matter, moving on, I am going to get a sip of water, and then we're going to go back to reading about Purim, the book of Esther. In the Gemish tradition, the 2 most important holidays are Hanukkah and Purim. So we are going to read about number 2, Purim. And qualifiers. This is a stream of peace. This is all about cultural exchange. We here at Ekelux live streams do not advocate or exhort anyone to do a damned thing. We are all about understanding and tolerance. Diversity macht frei. Israel is our greatest ally. So I just want everyone to know that this is just about understanding and comprehension. Okay, with all of that said, what are we looking at? I think I'm going to play track. We're going to play Sundripped by Calm Trues. This is off of his, I believe, 2011 album. I forgot the name of it, but it's a really good album, and I highly recommend that everyone check out Calm Trues. His early work genuinely is very good. This is his album before Galactic Melt, Galactic Melt. So, anyhow, getting some water, AFK, BRB. I freaking love that track. That is a great track. That's, again, Sun Dripped by Comtrues. No, really, that's an outstanding track. So anyhow, I think this is as good a time as any to go ahead and start learning a little bit more about Purim. So here we are. And okay, so we were talking about the quickest possible recap. Yesterday not yesterday, day before yesterday, we spent approximately 18 pages talking about the Book of Esther. And the Book of Esther centers mostly on a woman by the name of Esther who implores a King Ahasuerus, to please don't kill all of the Jews in Persia. And Esther got to her position because she had a cousin named Mordecai who somehow had the ability to put her in front of the king who married her. So Esther and Mordecai seem to form a kind of dyad of sorts. So whatever that's all about. Where are we? So yeah, I guess I'm going to go ahead and move over to nighttime. And now, no. We're all very much pro-Iranian here. This is a pro-Nassim stream, so we are all about our based Persians here. Anyhow, all right, so let's go ahead and continue from page 18. Here we go. And yes, the name of this book is The Feast of Esther, which is a book on Purim. Okay, here we go. Our narrative differs, and also I have to apologize in advance. Some of these sentences are just freaking weird, so I have to apologize for some of the sentences. Okay, this was written a long time, in like 1933, so it's a little weird. The cadence is not what I'm used to, so I'm just going to do my best. Continuing. Our narrative differs both in its simplicity and straightforwardness from the less lucid arguments not only of the higher critics but also of the rabbis. So the narrative, he's talking about the narrative of the Book of Esther. The problems of date and authorship have proved fascinating to many generations of scholars, most especially to that generation which saw the deciphering of the cuneiform inscriptions and the consequent revealing not of one but many Mesopotamian mythologies. The doctors of the Talmud are chiefly interested in reconciling by subtle disputation the apparent inconsistencies in which, for the learned, both Bible and Mishnah abound. As a general rule, the form in which the debate is couched is at once simple and sprightly, the real difficulties only being perceived when an attempt is made to reconstruct a complete line of argument. Okay, so great. Sand through your fingers. Awesome. There are never closely agenda, yeah. I think agenda's like pluralized there. So like agenda, plural, which we would say agendas, I suppose. There are never closely defined agenda. Fortunately, the evidence which the Talmud adduces concerning the Book of Esther is more historical than legal. Stiff-necked rule followers. It was the unexpected mention of, quote, a second letter of Purim, end quote, that so vastly intrigued the rabbis. Quote, what need could there have been for 2 letters, end quote, they ask. Curiously enough, 3 somewhat similar answers were propounded to solve this enigma. Where are we? It was held by some that when the first letter was received by the elders of the great synagogue, they said heatedly, quote, surely we have a sufficiency of woes and of troubles, yet you would add to them. Would you have us vaunt ourselves in our victory over Haman? Then surely the Gentiles will say that none are more despicable than we are, since we rejoice when they fall, end quote. That's a hell of a thing to say. Yeah. All right, let's continue. It was in reply to this objection that a second letter was written pointing out that the first letter was already in the archives of the Medes and the Persians, and that its publication in Israel could have no effect on relations with the Gentiles. Other rabbis held that the first letter was lost in some unknown way. This is inferred from the fact that we find no midrashim, parenthetical legends, and parenthetical based upon it. Esther therefore wrote, quote, a second letter of Purim, end quote, which she sent to the elders with the words, quote, inscribe my story for all generations, end quote. The elders refused to accede to her request in a reply quoted by Resh Lakish, quote, lo, I have written for the people of Israel the book divided into the law, the prophets, and the hagiographa, and not with 4 divisions, i.e. the scrolls as well, end quote. Parenthetical, an interpretation of Prov 22.20. I don't know what that is. This implies that the book of Esther, by virtue of its being a scroll, was not fit to be incorporated into the canon of the Old Testament. To this decision, the rabbis adhered until, reading on in the Bible, they came to the verse, quote, inscribe this in a book for a memorial, end quote, Exodus 17:14. On this authority, they accepted the scroll which Esther had written, rewrote it, and included it in the canon. I see. So, Esther is actually a late edition, number one. Number two, it was rewritten. So, okay, so what I was saying in the next couple of days, oh my god, King Kush, I want to play Enigma so bad, you have no idea. That first album, oh my god, I really want to play Sadness right now. I'm not going to because I got a fucking copyright strike, but I want to play Sadness by Enigma so bad, you guys don't even know. Anyway, so as I was mentioning a day or two ago, that I think that there are many things that are missing within the book of Esther. It seems as though this is tacitly affirmed in what I just read. On this authority, they accepted the scroll which Esther had written, rewrote it, and included it in the canon. So it's a rewritten thing. The book of Esther is a rewritten thing. So, yeah, go and read the book of Esther and understand that this is actually considered an amazing thing, and people celebrate it to this day. Seriously, you'll be amazed at what you read. Okay, continuing. This solution, which the rabbis wove on a woof of biblical verses, is rewoven in the Palestinian Talmud into a somewhat more ornate fabric. We learn there that Rabbi Samuel bar Naaman, in the name of Rabbi Jonathan, said that Esther's message came before a council of 85 elders, of whom 30 were prophets. All were deeply grieved, and raising their voice in lamentation said, quote, Moses spake unto us, saying, From now on, no prophet has authority to introduce any new thing to you, end quote. But God gave light to their eyes, and reading on in the Bible, they came to the passage, quote, inscribe this in a book for a memorial, end quote. I don't know why I had 3 M's in that word, but whatever. And were able to accept the history of Esther as holy. So it seems as though Esther is based on something that has some historical weight to it and has been regarded as, quote, holy. Continuing. All 3 solutions have one feature in common. They reveal a real doubt whether the book was to be accepted into the canon of the Old Testament or not. Elsewhere, the rabbis continued to record their controversies in less imaginative but more vital discussion. Was the book of Esther so holy that it might be said, metame et hayadayim, parenthetical, it requires ritual cleanliness of the reader, and parenthetical, ritual cleanliness, I'll be darned. Those who reject it say that it was not inspired by the Holy One, blessed be He, if only for the reason that the name of God does not occur even once in the book. For this fact, 2 explanations are offered. One is that Mordecai, knowing that his account would be translated into Persian for the king's records, took care not to introduce the name of God, lest it be rendered by some as an abomination, and the other that the book of Esther was translated by the men of the great synagogue from the Persian into the Hebrew, and it was impossible that the name of God should occur in the Persian. Our Kabbalists are faced with no such difficulty. They see the name of God in the title Melech, parenthetical king, end parenthetical, which occurs 184 times in the Megillah, wherein they follow the lead of the writers of the Midrashim, who interpreted this word, when unqualified, by a following Ahasuerus as referring to God. Okay, so anytime they say king, but without Ahasuerus, they're referring to God, or so the Kabbalists say. I'll be darned. Continuing. Krochmal, a great Jewish scholar of 19th century who draws his inspiration exclusively from Jewish sources, concludes that our book of Esther is the second letter, not only written in Hebrew but also inspired by God. In his view, it was the first letter written in Aramaic which was lost. That the sanctity of the book of Esther should have been cause of contention is hardly surprising, for the book is scarcely an account of God's dealings with man, but only an explanation of a festival of the Persian Jews. One is safe, however, in concluding from these arguments that down to a comparatively late period there was no unanimity of rabbinic opinion as to whether Esther was a fit book to be incorporated into the canon of the Tanakh. The Tanakh is the Old Testament. The Torah is the first 10 books. Continuing. Moreover, the fact that the tractate Megillah in the Talmud, after discussing the sanctity of the book, continues with a fanciful commentary upon it establishes a precedent for the elaboration of the scroll of Esther in later times. In his article entitled Purim und Parodie, which the learned Moritz Steinschneider published in 1902, he gave his opinion of the then recent advances in the, quote, higher criticism, end quote, of the book of Esther. He says, quote, oh gosh, I'm going to mutilate this, so, oh gosh darn it. Okay, I'm going to mutilate this. I'm going to assume that it's possible that Jonathan Pohl will be able to first finish laughing at me and then possibly try to give some kind of a rough translation of what I am attempting to say. Vorber erst ein Studie über die Geschlecht dieses Festes Aufschluss geben kann, während in nur seit nur christlich gelehrt über Ursprung und Namen von Purim in Verbindung mit der höheren Kritik über das Buch Esther Forschungen angestellt, auch seltsame Hypothesen aufgestellt haben, die ich dahingestellt sein las. Okay, I have no freaking idea of what the hell any of that means other than mit. That's pretty much all I've got. And das. That's really about it. Okay, continuing. Okay. If anyone has any clue as to what any of that meant, I'll just go ahead and allow that to... Okay, continuing. Today there is an even vaster array of hypotheses, perhaps to be left unconsidered. They come from the pens of those higher critics who find in Esther an ever-flowing source of discussion. Many are scholars who have valiantly attempted to explain the difficulties with the narrative which the narrative involves. From their theses, it becomes increasingly clear that the problems of date and authorship of the Book of Esther can scarcely be adequately considered unless some solution is arrived at to the problem of the origin of the festival. The purpose of the book is patent to the most casual reader. It is to account for the institution and to promote the celebration of the Purim festival. But before we can permit ourselves to enter into the maze of higher critical sources and origins, it would be well to point out a few of the inconsistencies in the book itself which make it difficult, not to say impossible, to accept Esther at its face value. Yeah, no freaking duh. Okay, continuing. We are told by Herodotus that a certain Xerxes, who reigned from 485 to 464 in Persia, that's before Christ, was the tallest and most handsome man in the Persian host, but that in character he was a cowardly and cruel tyrant. If this is the impulsive despot who is to be identified with the Ahasuerus, good God, it's a weird word. It's a weird name. Moving on. Ahasuerus of the Book of Esther, it seems a little unlikely that so proud a monarch should accept a captive as his queen and a Jew as his prime minister. Moreover, the edict of Haman commanding the massacre of all the Jews would surely have met with opposition from the other Persian satraps. To accept as an historical event the second edict of Mordecai, which plunged the empire into civil strife, is so strange that one is surprised that Ahasuerus should ratify it, and if it did gain royal approval, one is still surprised that no other historical records corroborate our story. When Esther was chosen to be queen, it is said that she did not reveal her Jewish origin, though she was apparently known to be the niece of Mordecai the Jew. Stranger still is the assumption that Mordecai and Esther could continue in close communication with one another when Esther was already in the harem of Ahasuerus. Haman describes the Jews as being dispersed throughout all the provinces of the kingdom of Persia and as being disobedient to the king's laws. Gee, where have I heard that one before? But in the Persian period, the Jews, so far as can be inferred from other sources, were not scattered throughout the provinces, nor is there any record to show that they were rebellious, though this latter may well have been a lie fabricated by Haman to strengthen his own position and to secure the destruction of his hated enemies. The picture of Persian manners and the customs presents inconsistencies with such facts as are known. Generally speaking, they convey the atmosphere of a fairy tale rather than that of sober reality, even the fantastic reality of the Persian court. Let's see here. We are now at page 27. I'm just a little bit tired. We're coming up on the top of the hour. I am going to play one more track. And then, I'm going to play another track, and I am going to drink a little bit of water, and then I might come back for just another couple pages and then drift off to sleep because, my gosh, super tired. Anyhow, what are we looking at here? This is Lucy in Disguise by VTWA. Excuse me. featuring Laura Claire. I have no idea who or what this is. I just remember thinking that it was kind of a neat track. So here we go. AFK BRB. Okie doke. So that was kind of a neat track. I like it a lot. And yeah, I'm going to come back for just another couple of pages. So here we are. Learning about Purim. So here we go. Alright, so apparently there are thoughts about how realistic the account may or may not be. Is it real? Is it not real? Is it based on fact? Or is it just a fairy tale? Who knows? Let's see what supposition is offered to us. I think I'm just going to go to maybe page 33 or so. This whole thing ends at page 53-ish, so I think if I can make it to page 33, I should be able to make it through 20 pages, I think, tomorrow. We'll see what happens. Continuing. Such are the... Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll read the last sentence of the previous paragraph, and then I'll continue on to the next paragraph. Okay, here we go. Generally speaking, they convey the atmosphere of a fairy tale rather than that of sober reality, even the fantastic reality of the Persian court. Such are the improbabilities and inconsistencies which lay the historical character of the book open to grave doubts. Weird sentence, but okay. Of the critics, Josephus assigned the book to the reign of Artaxerxes? Jeez. If it were Spanish, it would be Ataherhes. Anyway. The first, with whom he identifies Ahasuerus. Philo ascribes the book to the high priest Joachim. Augustine held that Ezra was its author, while the Talmud, in a passage already referred to, says that the men of the great synagogue wrote the book. And many of the critics who have doubted the historical character of Esther have nevertheless held that the festival took its origin in some Jewish victory, or otherwise there is no sufficient reason why the festival should have been included in the sacred calendar. Thus, Bleek, B-L-E-E-K, I don't know who Bleek is. Thus, Bleek suggested that it marks the end of the Babylonian exile, which Wilrich, wandering still deeper in the labyrinth of Jewish history in the Greek period, sees in the book an allegorical interpretation of the fate of Israel in 48 before Christ in Egypt under the Ptolemies. In 1772, Anno Domini, Michaelis put forward the view that Purim was founded to commemorate the victory of Judas Maccabeus Nicanor on the 13th day of Adar 161 before Christ. He holds that the name of the festival is to be derived from the Hebrew pura, parenthetical, wine press, and parenthetical, in some such phrase as that in Isaiah chapter 63, where the word is used in a description of God vanquishing his enemies, quote, I trod down the winepress pura alone, and there, i.e. my enemies, life juice splashed forth. Wow, that's actually a hell of an allegory. I trod down the winepress alone, and their life juice splashed forth. Good God, that is vicious. Continuing, nor was Michaelis the last to see in Esther a product of Greek Syria. The profound historian Graetz allows his fancy to roam perhaps a little too freely over the later Greek period in seeking out a time which should mirror in its feeling that outlook which is reflected in the book of Esther. He came to the conclusion that the most likely epoch for the composition of the book was that of the persecutions of Antiochus Epiphanes, and that the festival was a Jewish version of the Greek feast of Phthoigia, that's a weird word, or cask opening, a season of wine drinking and sending of presents like the Vinalia of Romans. Side note, there is a tradition in Purim that you should get so drunk that you cannot tell the difference between blessed be Mordecai and curse to the name of Haman. So you have to be so drunk that you can't tell the two apart. Weird. That actually seems to, that whatever thing seems to lend some credibility to this idea of a wine-themed interpretation. Continuing. He thinks, let's see here, he thinks, who is he? Oh yeah, the Antiochus Epiphanes. He thinks that in all probability the custom was introduced by a tax gatherer in the reign of Ptolemy Philopator, 2025 to 205 before Christ. The evidence which has led so many critics on the path of error may be grouped as follows. The verse, quote, "And Mordecai wrote these things," end quote, parenthetical 9:20 and parenthetical Book of Esther, I assume, does not refer, as Clement of Alexandria maintained, to the whole book, but only to the letter which follows. Otherwise, no reference is made in Esther either to the book itself or to its author. No writer before the beginning of the Christian era mentions the book, not even Ben Sira, parenthetical, circa 170 before Christ, end parenthetical, who gives a list of the great Jews of the past. Purim is mentioned first in the second book of Maccabees under the name of, quote, Mordecai Day, end quote, and next in Josephus, which seems to indicate that Purim was not kept by the Palestinian Jews before the 1st century before Christ. The halo of romance cast upon the Persian Empire and scattered Jews, and the conversion of multitudes to Judaism, parenthetical 817 and 927, end parenthetical, is typical rather than conversion of the multitudes to Judaism. Oh, yes. Because everyone was so afraid of, because Jews, they slaughtered 75,000 people. They went on some kind of a mass murder rampage. So people started converting to, or pretending to convert to Judaism so that Jews might not murder them. Is typical rather of the background of the Greek period, the absence of any theological trend in the book, the lack of any messianic hope, the strong hatred of the enemies of Israel, the spirit of independence, all seem to be in keeping rather with the spirit of the Jews in the Greek period. And lastly, the language of the book and the style in which it is written point to a late date. In the view of certain critics, the author is so strongly influenced by Aramaic that his Hebrew is both awkward and labored. He seems to have written his work at a period when Hebrew was no longer the vernacular of the Jews, but only the language of the sacred books. But even if one allows that Esther belongs in its present form to the 3rd or even the 2nd century before Christ, this does not exclude the possibility that the story originated in Persia and was handed down by oral tradition till it was written for all time to explain the feast in Purim, or the feast of Purim. Graetz has inspired many scholars to search through the Greek period for an event which might serve as a peg on which to hang the book of Esther. Kunin's precise 130 before Christ can hardly inspire credence, more especially as a further study of the festival in the light of new knowledge leads us to take its origin back to a more remote date. Good heavens. Let's see here. We are at 12:12. Yeah, I'm going to keep going because we're almost to page 33. I'm actually going to stop on page 32 because 33 is just like one giant paragraph that starts on page 32 and then ends on 34. So I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to go to 32. Continuing. All the more recent solutions of the problems of the date of the composition of the Book of Esther are inextricably bound up with the solution of the problem of the origin of the festival which it was written to institute. The rivers of scholarship, like the ancient rivers of Eden, flow for Purim through 4 lands: Greece, Palestine under Hellas, Persia, and Babylon. The Grecian wadi of the Pythogia is lost in the sands of the desert of improbability quite near its source, for though it is conceivable that certain Grecian customs may have influenced the mode of Purim observance, yet the evidence that Purim takes its origin in the Pythogia is too scanty to convince. Hatred for Greece and incompatibility of religious concepts were far too prevalent in ancient Israel to permit of conscious syncretism. Okay, so basically, Jews are like absolutely not to any Greek influences, and yeah, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call it there. We're on page 32. I can feel my mind slowly closing around me. Today was a bit of a long day for me, so this is a fantastic time, I think, to call stream. So basically, Purim, there is no precedent. There's nothing that that we can point to say Esther is based on that. Scholarship is in question. Whether authorship is in question. Everything is in question. The book seems to be a flight of fancy, in my own opinion. If there's no historical backing to it, basically it's just the celebration of a fantasy of killing, not unlike Inglorious Bastards. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and take off. I didn't do any case streaming today, but we'll just pretend that I did for a moment. So, normal closeout procedure. Rule number 1. Because, I'm a big advocate of firearms ownership, and if you're going to go in that direction, you must know about safety and handling. So, 4 rules of safety and handling as outlined by Jeff Cooper. Rule number 1, always treat every firearm like it is loaded. Rule number 2, never cover or sweep anything that you are not willing to destroy. Rule number 3, your finger stays off of the trigger until your sights are on target. And the 4th and final rule is be aware of your target and what's beyond it. Safety first. And there you go. Alright guys, super duper tired, definitely going to bed. I'm not going to play an album today because I'm just going to pass out, so there you go. Yeah, everyone, have a good sleep, be good, mind your P's and Q's, be aware that shit's coming down the pike, so just don't make yourself too big a target. My context is Los Angeles, so this is why I'm thinking in these terms. So just bear with me. But yeah, don't paint a target on your back. So anyhow, yeah, wash your hands, brush your teeth, floss. Cheers.